Right now, we are living through the biggest trading card boom in history, and Pokemon is leading the charge. But is it all just a huge bubble? Stick around until the end, where I answer not only that question, but also one that I think is even more important. Maybe the most important question of all when it comes to your enjoyment of the hobby. Okay, let's get into it. Over 65 billion Pokemon cards have been printed as of 2024, and the demand is only growing. Box breaks sell out in seconds. Special releases cause websites to crash. Certain cards command record-breaking prices at auction. What was once a childhood hobby has turned into a multi-billion-dollar market where collectors, investors, and longtime fans are all vying for a piece of Pokemon history. And make no mistake, this is not the first boom in Pokemon, not by a long shot. So how did a simple trading card game become one of the most dominant forces in the collectible world today? Let's find out by going back to where it all started. The Pokemon trading card game was born in 1996, shortly after the Japanese launch of Pokemon Red and Green for the Game Boy, and shortly before the release of the hit anime that debuted in April of 1997. Published by Media Factory and designed by Magic the Gathering veteran Takumi Akabane, the game immediately capitalized on Japan's growing Pokemon craze. Unlike other trading card games at the time, Pokemon had a distinct advantage. Every card carried the charm of an already familiar, and in many cases beloved, video game character. Collecting, battling, and trading weren't just mechanics. They were extensions of the Pokemon world itself. The TCG's popularity absolutely exploded in Japan. Pokemon wasn't just a game. It was a cultural tidal wave that was just waiting to crash down in the West. When the base set launched in 1999, it became an instant phenomenon. Kids, collectors, and competitive players alike all rushed to buy out packs. First edition cards disappeared almost instantly, making them highly coveted from the very start. As a result, shortly thereafter Wizards of the Coast released the Shadowless variant, an early printing of cards that, like first edition, lacked the signature shadow effect on the card's frame. These too soon became another rare treasure for collectors. Within months, Pokemon cards weren't just a playground obsession. They were already being treated as high-end collectibles, with certain cards selling for far above their original pack price. Following the unlimited print run of base set, expansions like Jungle and Fossil kept the momentum going in 1999 and 2000. These sets introduced more fan-favorite Pokemon and completed the original Kanto region Pokedex. I would call these few years the first boom of the North American Pokemon market. By the early 2000s, Pokemon had begun to experience the inevitable decline that follows any major fad. While expansions like Team Rocket, Gym Heroes, and Neo Genesis introduced exciting new cards and mechanics, they didn't capture the same cultural dominance as the base set. By the time e-reader era sets like Expedition, Aquapolis, and Skyridge rolled around in 2002 and 2003, the casual audience had largely moved on, and Pokemon cards were no longer the must-have items they once were. Plus, I know rose-tinted goggles are a real thing here, but come on, these cards are kind of hideous. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. The game had entered into a quieter phase, one that would last for over a decade before the next big boom. Of note, in 2003, Wizards of the Coast lost their license to produce Pokemon cards, marking a significant turning point for the game. The Pokemon Company, which had already been handling the Japanese version of the TCG, took full control of the North American market. This shift led to a period of reinvention, with Nintendo and the Pokemon Company focusing on revitalizing the game through fresh mechanics, new card styles, and a renewed emphasis on both collecting and competitive play. One of the most important changes came with the EX series, which began with the Ruby and Sapphire expansion. This era introduced Pokemon EX, ultra-powerful versions of classic Pokemon that had significantly higher HP and stronger attacks. However, there was a catch. If a player's EX Pokemon was knocked out, the opponent could take 2 prize cards instead of 1. This high-risk, high-reward mechanic added a new layer of strategy, making battles more dynamic and unpredictable. The EX era also introduced a new level of rarity and collectability, with the stunning holographic prints and powerful chase cards that made packs more exciting to open. This innovation helped reinvigorate interest in the TCG, bringing back players who had drifted away after the initial Pokemon craze had faded. In Diamond and Pearl, the game then introduced Level X cards, a new evolution mechanic that added even more nuance to the gameplay. Instead of traditional evolutions, Pokemon Level X could be played on top of their standard evolved forms, granting them powerful new attacks and abilities without replacing their original moves. Then, with the arrival of the Black and White era, the Pokemon TCG saw another major shift: full arts. These cards featured artwork that extended across the entire card, removing the traditional borders and creating visually stunning designs. Full art versions of key Pokemon and trainers quickly became some of the most sought-after collectibles in the game. These innovations, stronger Pokemon, new evolution mechanics, visually stunning card designs, and the return of ultra-rare collectibles, kept the Pokemon TCG fresh and engaging during these somewhat slower years. Then, as Pokemon's 20th anniversary approached, the Pokemon Company leaned even more heavily into nostalgia, bringing back classic designs and characters. The XY Evolutions expansion in 2016, for example, was the first major base set inspired reprint since the game's release. It recreated original 1999 cards with updated mechanics and fresh new designs. Fans who had abandoned the game as kids suddenly had a reason to buy packs again. And at the time, this was just a clever marketing move, but no one realized it was perfectly timed for what was about to happen next. On July 6, 2016, Pokemon Go launched and the world rediscovered its love for Pokemon overnight. Cities were filled with players chasing Pokemon in the real world. Who else remembers the thrill of placing your highest CP Pokemon at the very top of a 10 Pokemon gym tower? Only me? If you do and you're not subscribed yet... With this massive surge in Pokemon nostalgia, something unexpected also happened. People started digging up their old Pokemon cards. Google searches for Pokemon skyrocketed. Prices on eBay began climbing, and a new generation of collectors entered the hobby, searching for the cards that they never got as kids. With the nostalgia-fueled EX Evolution set on shelves at the exact same time, Pokemon cards absolutely exploded in popularity. Players, collectors, and even complete newcomers flooded back into the game. This was the hobby's first big boom since its launch in 1999. And little did we know, the stage was set for Pokemon cards to boom again shortly thereafter. But no one could have predicted just how big it would get. In 2020, the world shut down. Stuck at home, people turned to nostalgic hobbies, and Pokemon cards became one of the biggest beneficiaries. With stimulus checks in hand and time to spare, collectors old and new inundated the market. YouTubers like Logan Paul began buying and opening vintage Pokemon boxes, sending demand through the roof. Prices on rare cards soared to record highs. Base set Charizard, once a childhood game piece, became a six-figure asset. Scalpers emptied retail shelves, and companies like PSA and Beckett were overwhelmed with grading submissions, leading to a year-long backlog. Retailers implemented purchasing limits, McDonald's Pokemon 25th anniversary packs led to riots, and suddenly, Pokemon cards weren't just a nostalgic hobby, they were a serious investment. The Pokemon Company responded by ramping up print runs, but the demand didn't slow. By the end of 2021, Pokemon had cemented itself as the trading card game of the modern era. And as Pokemon card prices continued to climb during the pandemic, a new take on the hobby emerged: rip and ship streaming. Platforms like Whatnot, Twitch, and YouTube saw an explosion of live streamers opening packs in real time for viewers who had purchased them in advance. This format offered instant gratification. Instead of waiting for packs to arrive in the mail, buyers could experience the thrill of a live pack opening and have their cards shipped directly to them. Popular streamers turned pack openings into high-energy, interactive events, drawing massive audiences and fueling some FOMO. Streamers like PokeRev and Lootbox TV capitalized on the hype, opening thousands of packs every week. The Whatnot marketplace became a hub for Pokemon collectors, turning pack openings into an entertainment spectacle. High-profile breaks, where influencers and high-end collectors would buy into vintage box openings, added to the frenzy, making rare pulls feel like must-watch events. This phenomenon didn't just cater to existing collectors either. It brought new people into the hobby, many of whom had never purchased a Pokemon pack before. The social, fast-paced nature of rip and ship streams helped sustain demand long after the initial pandemic boom. Now, as the market stabilized, live stream pack openings remained a major force in the hobby, blending entertainment, commerce, and community in a way that continues to shape the way people collect today. This was the Pokemon TCG's third big boom, but it wasn't long until the next one. In late 2024, the Pokemon Company announced Pokemon TCG Pocket, a mobile app that allows players to collect digital Pokemon cards with stunning animations and effects. At first, people were concerned that this would cannibalize the hobby of collecting cards in paper, but that's not how things turned out. Feeling the thrill of opening beautiful full-art chase cards digitally led many people to want to do so in person. And if history has taught us anything, it's that Pokemon cards will always find a way to adapt and grow. And with Pokemon TCG Pocket, the game is reaching an even bigger audience than ever before. And that brings us to today, Pokemon's fourth big boom. With sky-high prices and sky-high demand, many have asked the inevitable question, is this just a bubble? It's true that we've seen periods of extreme hype before. First in 1999, then again in 2016 with Pokemon Go, and most recently during the pandemic. Each time, prices surged, only to cool off when the frenzy subsided. And really, this time is no different. I don't believe prices will continue upwards indefinitely, but I also don't think that they're returning to the pre-boom levels either. Here I've put together a chart of what this boom-bust cycle looks like. And despite what I just said, there really aren't any true busts. Prices tend to decrease from their peaks in each case, but always to a new normal that was higher than the one before. Now, this isn't normally the way I would present data, but since it's so new, here it goes. On a stream a few months after the release of Pokemon Pocket, the YouTuber I mentioned earlier, PokeRev, polled his livestream viewers asking them when they joined the hobby. Insanely enough, over 1/3 of the 15,000 plus people responding had joined the hobby within the last 3 months.
37% of people here I would consider basically brand new to the hobby. That's a huge chunk of people right now.
Sure, some of them will inevitably drop off, but many of them won't. To the dismay of their wallets, these people have fallen into one of the best hobbies of the modern era: collectible cardboard. But there's one final thing I'd like to say, and it might just be the most important point of all. For people that have been in the hobby, or even those that are just joining, it's easy to see the current prices and feel upset, like the hobby just isn't for you. Either because you can't afford it, or because you can't justify spending this much on cardboard, as beautiful as it can be. Or worst of all, you feel a fear of missing out. You buy cards or packs because you're anxious that prices will only ever continue to rise, until they're truly out of reach. So to anyone that's feeling this way, myself included, don't feel bad to take a step back from the hobby, or find other more affordable ways to take part until the craze has died down. The hobby isn't going anywhere, and if there's one thing we can be absolutely certain of, it's that the Pokemon Company will only continue to print more and more gorgeous cards in the future. This hobby is meant to be fun, and if you're not having fun at the moment, take a break. There are other card games out there, like the ones that I talk about in these videos right here.